is the first day of the hearings for the annual plan. So we have an apology. I'll begin with the apologies. So the apology is from Tony Fox. Are there any other apologies?
No.
Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder?
I'll move it. Murray here. I'll move the Tony's apology.
Move, Murray.
Sally.
Good on you, Sal. Thanks, Sal. Second is Sally. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We now, items not on the agenda. There's just some late items, some late submissions, but which will include those in the resolution. Any conflicts of interest? I'm picking there'll be none. And so we'll move into the resolution, which is 2.1 for the annual plan hearings. We'll take that as read. And so I'm presuming everybody has read that with the suggested resolutions. So, yes. Right, so we're taking that as read. I'm happy to move the resolution and to include the further late submissions. Do I have a seconder?
Christy.
Okay, seconded Sally. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Aye. Carried. Right, you happy with that, Alison? Or Ariana?
Yes, we're happy with that. Thank you, Sandra.
So we can now move straight into the hearings part of today and welcome our first submitter, Lyndon Suckling. His submission is on page 233 if you're on hard copy, or page 245 if you're online. So welcome, Lyndon.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thanks so much for
the floor is yours. Oh, Lyndon, just yes. One thing I've got to advise everybody about the conduct of proceedings, which is that you have about 5 minutes to speak, and then we have some questions. But if we don't take up the full time, you might be able to make a further comment. And the councillors can only ask questions. So the floor is now yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on the proposed 2021 annual plan. I'd like to compliment you and the councillors for what I feel is a very well-rounded plan. I've been through it in great detail. What you're proposing to spend money on, I think it's a very balanced and responsible plan. I want to submit as a homeowner in TCDC region that I'm in full support of the proposed rates increases. I realise it's going to be put a bit of pain onto ratepayers, but I feel that it's our duty as ratepayers to help support the region and what you're proposing to do with infrastructure and tourism support. In my submission that I put through, there was one comment I made which I want to amend, and that is I suggested that there might be some tourism spend that could be deferred, pushed down the track a little bit. I want to withdraw that. Last week I went on to a webinar put on by Destination Coromandel, Hadley and his team, and learned an interesting thing, and that is that 77% of the Coromandel spend in tourism is from domestic market, so New Zealanders, and a further 5.6% of spend is from Australia. So the bounce back, I think, to our region and in the Coromandel will be a lot swifter than it will be in other areas that are relying on international spend, that sort of thing. So I feel in your when you're looking at this annual plan, anything that's based around supporting tourism, whether it be wharf projects or whatever it might be, amenities, that you push on with that, because I feel as a ratepayer that's a great way of supporting that tourism market, and particularly with the local, a lot of that spend's coming out of the Golden Triangle. I feel it's going to be, Coromandel's going to bounce back quite well. Just on the other part of my submission was around housing in Thames, and it's something that although some of the councillors might remember me speaking on this in 2015, but I feel there's just a great lack of housing in Thames. I have two sons that have got deposits that want to, get into property, but the age of the housing market isn't really appealing to them. Thames is such a strategically placed town, and it's it's within 2 hours drive of half the population of New Zealand. If I live in Totara Valley Road, and if you come up the road, one of the guys at the end, he works in Morrinsville. I work across Australia and New Zealand as a sales rep. There's other people up the street that are sales reps. It's a great place to base yourself, and there'd be great demand for extra housing in this region. So what I was really wanting to submit on was rezoning land around Totara Valley and Matatoki and getting the pipes in the ground, getting the infrastructure, getting the infrastructure going. That in itself will bring in more housing. More housing equals more people spending money in town and around the Coromandel. It means the houses have to be built. That's the local suppliers make more money. There's more money getting spent in our local shops. The tradies are kept busy, and the whole Coromandel will prosper through it. We'll keep growing. And I, as a ratepayer, I want to support that. And I realised that the rates increases historically have been totally unrealistic. 10 years ago, I moved from Hamilton, and I'll just have to be a little bit blunt about this, but living in Thames is a very cheap place to live as far as rates are concerned. We've got a lot of benefits here, and it's a very, very cheap place to live. I was talking to someone down the road, and they've moved in from out of town, and they're laughing. They said, this is just ridiculously cheap here. They'd moved in from down Manawatu region. So it's an interesting thing. I know there's a bit of resistance probably going to be to it, but also talking to an old retiree in the area, and he was just saying, look, he said, we're actually doing all right out of this whole COVID thing. They're getting paid more from the government, and they're actually sort of saving money through it all. So I think with so many in that bracket in the Coromandel, I don't see it being a great problem at all to put the rates up, as long as it's going into infrastructure and into supporting tourism and growing housing, the housing market. It'll come back in rating units. Just on Totara Valley, I live about a third the way up, and we've got a scheme plan in place for when the sewer does come up the road. That will give an additional 4 or more rating units. And we've got 4 house plans already drawn up, ready to roll. So there's sort of $2.5 to $3 million which will go straight into local suppliers and tradies and that sort of thing. And then, of course, if you go up the other end of Totara Valley Road, there's huge areas for excellent housing that's well elevated. So that's really all I have, Sandra. So I very much appreciate you giving me this chance to speak, and I just want to just say, as a homeowner, I'm in full support of the rates increase. It's gonna hurt. I am on reduced income at the moment due to this, the COVID lockdown, and it is going to hurt. But I'm more than happy to sacrifice to see the Coromandel grow and incoming families come into the area. That's all I had.
Thank you, Lyndon. I'll kick off by asking the first question. Though, while I appreciate your support for a rates increase, given the difficult time that we're currently in, which was totally unexpected at the time the rates were struck, do you think that there should be some consideration of the current situation in when we assess and do the deliberations in regard to rates?
Well, yeah, there's probably 2 parts we need to look at, or you need to look at on that. Is absolutely there could be some things that could be trimmed back. If you look particularly around sporting, that sort of thing, where there's going to be limited contact for a while, just push a few things down the road. Maybe you might look at borrowing a little bit more to defer. One thing I would caution you on. I watched a webinar last week. It's on YouTube from Infrastructure New Zealand. And obviously the current government, and no doubt if the government changed later in the year at the election, either way, the big focus is on getting infrastructure going. And the cost of doing infrastructure is only going to go up. There is going to be so much coming on, you know yourself, I think probably you've been involved in shovel-ready projects, that sort of thing, that you know, if we defer things, it's only going to cost us a lot more down the track. So we really do need to bite the bullet. It's, you know, I guess there is going to be some pain, and not everyone's in the same boat as me. I guess, you know, I'm not well off in any way, shape or form. But I think if we don't, you know, spend that money very shortly, it's going to end up costing you a lot more, and the rates increases are going to have to be a lot more to catch up. But.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Lyndon? There being none.
Murray here, just a quick one. You said that Thames is a cheap place to live. Would you just like to quantify that a little bit better? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I was referring to rates. Sorry, that was more where the discussion was around. The gentleman I was talking to had come from down country, and you know, he was paying $4,500 or something from his property there. He's got about 3 or 4 times the size property here, and I think he's paying about 3.5. You know, and it was quite similar for us coming from Hamilton. You know, I feel it is you know, the rates are very reasonable here at the moment compared to other parts. You might say, okay, they might be cheaper in Auckland or something, but of course they are in a high density place. You've got a lot more rating units, and what we've got to see, I think, in Thames is if we can bolt another, you know, open up the valley or at Metatoki and get another, you know, 500 or 1,000 rating units, well then we're going to start seeing some economy in that. So does that make sense?
Thank
Murray?
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Lyndon. We really appreciate you clicking in this morning.
No problem at all.
Thank you. Great contribution. Thank you.
Yes.
And we have our next submitter. Our next submitter is Morris Perry. Ariana, what?
It appears that Morris isn't in at the moment, so one of the girls is just going to find him.
Okay, can we take Marge, please?
Yes, we can. We can take Marge.
Page 208 on hard copy, or page 220 on online copy. Marge, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to hear me today. I think I'll be brief.
Thank you, Marge.
Yeah,
sorry,
so
you don't have to be brief.
So I'm resident here in Whangamata, and have a property along the beachfront and loving it. I raised a submission which was regarding the prompt in your consultation document to identify items that may help in removing some of the costs from your budget. And I have suggested that having another look at whether the item for the Whangamata boardwalk is appropriate at this time. And, you know, it's a little unclear as to what that line item is intended to fund in this annual plan. At 179,000, it's not a large amount of money, so clearly can't be, from my understanding, funding any significant work. When the consultation happened over the summer regarding the boardwalk proposals, comment was made that there had been consultation already with the community, that there had been a document dating back to 2011 on a strategy that indicated in a very vague way that there would be some walkways and things in Whangamata. It was a surprise to the community to have a proposal of the detail and nature that was presented just before Christmas for a very significant structure across the dunes in Whangamata. It was also suggested that consultation leading up to this had included a line item in an annual plan. So I'm basically clocking this one and saying it's not clear to me what that line item is about. Certainly As a professional who works in this area, that number would certainly not suggest anything like the costs that would be involved in going through the formal processes of environmental assessment and consenting for such a significant development on a natural dune. Yeah, we're keen to understand what the item is actually for, and suggesting that any spending of this nature would be something you could defer. And certainly until the shoreline management plans have been completed, the reserve management plans been reviewed, and there is information available to the council and the community about what the consenting requirements really are related to such a scale of project. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Marge. Are there any questions of Marge? Very succinct. Got some good points there. Are there any other questions from Marge? There being none, thank you, Marge. Appreciate your coming in, taking the time to go online to us. Actually,
it's nice and easy, isn't it? It's great.
It is. It's very good. You know, and you don't even have to leave home. So
yeah,
really
I've still got my cup of tea, so that's nice. Thank you. You have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you,
bye-bye.
Marge. Appreciate it. Okay, so is Morris available now, or Morris is still not with us? So we'll move on to Peter Fearon.
It appears that Peter is not on here, Sandra, so we can move on to Don.
Moving through. What about Don Barry? He's with us. Don is with us, so we can take Don. You happy with that, Don? Is Don with us? Do you want to unmute your mic, Don?
Unmute my mic. Is that good?
You're there, Don.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome. And for the councillors, page 96 is the submission. So, Don, you have the floor. So welcome, and you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. I've never done this sort of thing before, so I'm a bit nervous, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible in summarising it. And I tried to get the key points on one page. I think we all recognise we're facing a situation that none of us will have faced in our lifetime by way of crisis. We'd all know folk. We've already had someone, one of the submitters, say, "Look, I've got less money in my pocket," so his company has made a decision to resize. We'll have friends, we'll have family, we'll have less money in their pockets. And I would expect every business in New Zealand that had its business plans prepared in that first quarter to have had a replan, and that would have been driven from the governance structure, the boards, and to basically replan based on what the future holds. And that would not only be the immediate financial year, 2020, 2021, but also the future, the next 3 years outlook. I'd also expect, if we look at New Zealand holistically in terms of the governance structures, I'd expect Treasury to be doing a heck of a lot of work, given that Treasury's income is linked to PAYE, it's linked to taxes, GST, company tax, and all of those things will be coming under pressure. So they will be, I would expect them to be relooking at. I guess this council, like other councils, are singularly unique. We're not under that same direct pressure of the levels of income in our community. But I think, notwithstanding that fact, and I think, Sandra, you asked the question, well, should we relook at it? And I guess my submission said, yes, this is. I don't think any governance or any board of directors has been tested as much than now. And it really is the challenges for leadership and governance are not easy. But I think being able to recognise the current situation, that friends and folk in our community and the businesses are not going to have the same income generation. What can we do? And if you actually scaled the budget to the level of affordability of the community, in fact, there may be a reduction. I don't know what that looks like, but I think saying, look, we want to have variations on a planned business as usual, not quite sure whether that's enough or whether you just go back and say, well, look, we want to, let's just build a plan from a zero base and see what that looks like, and whether that results in some results in some trimming or innovative ways of doing things, or pressure to simplify things. And we've seen that already. We've already seen central government say we need to possibly park the RMA, and the government becoming a lender to businesses. The environment, I think certainly an environment there where we can look to, how do you say, so I lost myself a bit, but there may be pressure points that can be applied to central government to help. So in a nutshell, it's just, look, we're in the tough times. People aren't going to have as much money, and how do we navigate through council's budget on a community that's got far less ability to pay. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Don. Are there any questions of Don? So you're quite right, Don, that we are exercising ourselves considerably, but also a lot of people are as well, and looking at what we can do in terms of rethinking the nice to haves and against what we absolutely need to have. So really thank you for your input into that. Unless anybody's got any questions, we just thank you very much for coming in, checking in with us this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well done, Don. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
All right, so we now invite, who's next? We've had Don, Lyndon. Is Natalie Dixon with us?
Yes, hi, I'm here.
Natalie, would you like to now present your submission? Welcome.
Sure, thank you. And
Natalie's page 90 for the benefit of the councillors. So welcome, and please, you have the floor. You have the mic.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. It's good to be able to be part of this. I just want to address my comments to two issues that I mention in general comments in my submission. The first one is the composition of the population that you are seeking to impose a sizable rates increase on. None of the accompanying documents paid attention to the actual people or said anything about them. The other is the extent to which TCDC might consider exploring and lobbying central government for a relativity-based additional funding scheme like that used in Australia. It's called Horizontal Fiscal Equalization. I spent 16 years in Australia working with Australian local governments, and this was a very important part of their funding. I'll explain more about it after I've outlined the composition of the population and those issues that I'm concerned about. But the whole idea of lobbying central government, it wouldn't be an immediate fix, of course, but as you know, local government New Zealand has been seeking to change its model of revenue gathering, and I believe that TCDC needs to be involved in helping to drive looking for that alternative model, mainly because of population ageing. Okay, so the population, you would know that TCDC has New Zealand's structurally oldest population out of all 67 territorial authority areas. In 2018, the median age here in TCDC was 54 years. That's the middle person, 54 years, compared to just 37 for total New Zealand. TCDC had 31% over the age of 65, 15% for total New Zealand. Now, out there across TCDC, proportions are much, much higher. For example, Pawanui, 45% of its usual residents over the age of 65, Tairua 35%, Whangamata 37%, Thames 34%. So very, very relatively old populations. And this this is an important point that I need to make here. I'm talking about the usually resident population. Now, that does not count all ratepayers. In fact, for TCDC, it really accounts for only half, because you have to work it out on the proportion of dwellings that are occupied and not occupied, and we have very high proportions here not occupied. So you have to connect the usually resident population with the occupied dwellings. It says that we are covering, when we talk about these population statistics, we're only covering about half the population. And the important thing is we actually don't know anything about the other half of the population, the other half of the ratepayer population. So all of the statistics that I'm talking about pertain to the people who are usual permanent residents. Okay. The proportion 65 and over is a very important indicator, but it's not necessarily the most important when it comes to looking at the capacity or incapacity of the population to accommodate increases in rates. The working age, the prime working age population, people aged 20 to 64 years, is actually relatively low here in TCDC. It was below 50% at the 2018 census, compared to just on 60% for total New Zealand. And for TCDC, that proportion had fallen by 11%, so our main working age population is falling, whereas for total New Zealand, it stayed about the same. And this is a reflection of the fact that we have such a lot of the population that comes into TCDC is an older population. Okay, but it means that the proportion of the population that is most able to manage an increase in rates is relatively low here and diminishing. And you look at things like labour force status and income sources and income for the TCDC population. In 2018, TCDC had much lower proportions employed, just over half or 54% than total New Zealand, which had 2/3 of its population employed. TCDC has much higher proportions that are not in the labour force, 43% compared to total New Zealand, 31%. I'm sorry to be throwing a lot of stats at you. I've made notes because I can't carry all these in my head either, but I just want to just make these points that the TCDC population is quite unique in terms of its age structure. It's disproportionately not working, disproportionately income sources, for example, much higher proportion getting a New Zealand super or veterans pension. We have 34% of TCDC's population, its main income source, compared to 17% for total New Zealand. A much smaller proportion of all income sources here come from salary, wages or self-employed earnings than total New Zealand. We have income here in 2018, almost 60% of the TCDC usually resident population earn less than 30,000. It's much lower for total New Zealand, 48% for total New Zealand. And let me say that in Thames, which is obviously one of our bigger towns, 61% earn less than 30,000. So that's huge. Our average income for usual residents here was 32,700, for total New Zealand, 37,000. So it means that an average rates bill, I think, was mentioned 2,800 per year. It's a high proportion of an individual's income in TCDC, more so than it is elsewhere. So that's just a bit about the background population statistics, where older population, much more on fixed incomes, many fewer of us actually working, and so on. And once you're no longer got an income coming in and you're just relying on that fixed income, rates increases become very important. Now, horizontal fiscal equalisation, it's a system whereby councils can appeal to a pool of funds that are supplied by central government, or obviously in Australia it's federal government. The pool is funded from GST, And when you have a higher than average visitor population, they call it a day tripper population, but visitors, tourists and so on, or a higher than average proportion of your population that is old, that sort of thing, you can appeal to that pool in order to gain additional funding. Because for areas like TCDC, where we have this unique population structure, it is going to be, I'm not just talking about right at the moment, or even with the COVID situation, but it's going to become increasingly difficult as we move forward with hugely rapid population aging for this population to be able to fund the infrastructure that it needs to keep this all-important part of New Zealand going, which is, you know, related to our tourism and our hosting of so many visitors and so on. The horizontal fiscal equalisation system is enshrined in the Australian Local Government Financial Assistance Act 1995. It's a couple of $1 billion in that pool last time I looked, where councils can apply to support their needs, and the whole principle is so that councils can provide the similar infrastructure to other areas, or the particular infrastructure that they need, irrespective of their ability to do so. So I would ask TCDC to take this is a longer term look at the picture. It's not just something that is going to solve our problem right now, but I would ask that TCDC takes a lead in trying to find new models of funding, especially for areas like us with our population as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I took note of that, so appreciate that heads up. I also took note of the legislation that you referred to as well. So thank you very much for that good bit of additional information. So I'll just ask, are there any questions of Natalie?
I have a question. It's Gary here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
As you're probably aware, approximately 50% of the population are absentee owners, and they pay approximately about 2/3 of the rates because they have more expensive properties. What do you propose to happen to absentee owners who at the moment are subsidising the permanents? Do you expect them to front up with more or what?
No, that I actually referred to that, the fact that all of those statistics pertain to the usually resident population, and that is only about half of the ratepayers. If you're saying it's actually that the non-residents are actually 2/3 of the ratepayers, I mean, you'd have the data, but I would be surprised based on the ratio of occupied private dwellings and households in them. I can't answer what.
I'm saying they pay about 2/3 of the rates and subsidise the permanents because they've got more expensive properties.
Well, that's nice for them if they've got more expensive properties. But my question was, what do you know of that population? You say that they've got more expensive properties, and that's fine because you've got the rating information, but what's the age structure? What's the income, income sources and so on? To what extent are they vulnerable as the usual resident population? I mean, you wouldn't want to see your usual resident population up and leave, would you?
No, but the point is a lot of these.
Okay, thank you, Gary. We'll leave it at that. This is it's just straight questions. Are there any other questions?
Here. Murray here, can I ask a question?
Yep.
My question is, we heard all about Australia, but why didn't you make any mention of the rates rebate scheme already operating here in New Zealand?
Because I made my submission on the basis of the scheme that I was most familiar with in Australia, working with it for 16 years over there, and the fact that it works so very well, that it would be a useful piece of the jigsaw to look at going forward, because the system of rate revenue gathering as it is at the moment will have to change in the context of population ageing.
Thank you, Natalie. Any other questions of Natalie?
One question, Sandra, please. John Morrissey.
Yep.
Natalie, you mentioned in your submission the $500 bond for using the community halls as being a bit steep. The same rates going is being looked at for Coromandel. What do you think would be a fair bond to be charged?
Oh, look, that was a minor point.
Yes.
It was a minor point, and it's refundable. So I just thought it might make it difficult for some smaller users. People use it for, you know, greeting, for meetings after funerals, for family to get together and so on.
Thank you.
Make the point perhaps that I didn't completely oppose the rates increase. What I said was I think that it should be constrained, and I think I mentioned 5% in my comments at the end, constraining the rates increase and also looking at new possibilities going forward because of the age structure of our population.
Natalie, thank you. I agree. It's a small point, but it is one we're going to have to address.
Thank you, John. Okay, so well, thank you very much, Natalie. I appreciate you checking in with us this morning. It's great to have you aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to, I don't think Morris Perry is with us, so we'll move on to Peter Fearon. Welcome, Peter. Peter,
yes.
Are you?
Yeah, you
right.
Can hear me?
Welcome, Peter.
Okay, good morning all. You've no doubt read my submission, and so I'm going to be fairly brief because there's not much more to say to it. One of the things, though, that I must point out is a significant little article about a couple up in Mangawai. There they went into a rates revolt and, of course, naturally they lost. And so they're faced with a $105,000 or $150,000 court cost. Now, this just goes to show or demonstrate the power that you guys have. We have no right to do anything with other than pay the bill. You guys have all the power. So I appeal to you to exercise it with compassion. There is, as the previous speaker has said, a lot of us who are on a fixed income of superannuation, we don't get a 10% increase to pay the rates. I do take advantage of the rates rebate scheme, which does help, I have to say that. But when you're paying a bucket a load of money, it's only a pittance that you get back. And I do believe that we are actually relatively poorly served by the council whenever we ask for assistance, as we people who live at Tipuru and where we live at Tararoo, there is nothing happening. There's lots of words, but nothing actually happens about protection from bad weather incidents. Now, bearing in mind that the council has seen fit to subsidise the repair of Monotiri, and I know that the circumstances of that, where the council, which is us, the ratepayers, have had to take responsibility for some things that didn't happen in the past. So we're all liable, but this is another situation here on the coastal areas of the Coromandel where once again, councils have, because of a need of continuing need for rate income, have allowed developments to occur in places where they should never have. So, you know, we're all once again in this collective responsibility basket that the council in the past have allowed places to be built where they shouldn't have been built. So there's that point of view. So I would appeal to you to be a little, as the Prime Minister has said, be kind. And 10% of a rate increase is not kind. It's bullying. Bullying the people who are on a very, very restricted income. The rates, for me personally, take approximately 25%, I think it is, of my pension. Now that's before I can buy groceries, before I can go to the doctor, go and buy clothes, whatever. There's this lump of money is taken and I have no say. I can't appeal to anybody. I can't say, hang on, this is not fair. I can't go to the Commerce Commission. I mean, you guys, as I said, have all the power, and I plead with you to exercise that responsibility. And when I hear that you've gone up by 10% in order to meet the ratepayers' expectations, that is not the expectations of a large part of the ratepayers. Now, I hear that 2/3 of the population don't live here. The fact that they choose to have a second home shows that it is discretionary income from them. So I don't think they are in, and also I might add that these are the people who do nothing to contribute to our society. They are not members of the Coast Guard. They are not members of the St John's Ambulance. They are not members of all the other little bodies that tie our community together. So when somebody says, when one of the councillors says that it is the absentee land owners who are contributing 2/3 of the rates, they are contributing zero when it comes to supporting the society with the various activities that we have. So I think that we residents do contribute an awful lot to the society, but just remember, we are on a very, very fixed income, and a 10% rate increase is just really quite unaffordable. And this then causes us to think seriously about whether we can actually afford to live here, and forces us out of our homes, it forces us out of our community, it forces us away in some cases from our family, simply because we can't afford to live here anymore. So I'd like you to take that into consideration. So that's it from me. I looked through the capital expenditure. There's many, many things there that could be postponed, or the expenditure could be spread out over a greater number of years. So, you know, when we look at very fancy facilities, for example, on the eastern seaboard communities, we have to bear in mind just how many people actually live there and use these facilities, and it's not many. So just bear that in mind. You don't need to have facilities that are going to be used for just 1 week or 2 weeks in the year and cost hundreds of thousands to install them. And I know this may seem a grumpy old man from the point of view that some of those facilities are for children, but I do think that this is where, if there was more of a community spirit, they would get set to get up to some fundraising and provide them without involving the council at all. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Look, I'll just take you up on a couple of points. I think it's important to do so. 49% of our ratepayers are absentee, but they contribute hugely to all of our rescue services and most of the activities that happen throughout the district. So I can absolutely guarantee that that is the case. And to some extent, they survive. Some of these services actually survive because of it. So I now open it up to some questions. Does anybody have any questions? There being none. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you tuning in with us this morning.
Okay, it's really weird, isn't it?
It's interesting. It's great to see you. Thank you. We now have, is Morris Perry here? Morris.
Yes.
Morris, welcome.
Thank you.
Page 175 of the hard copy or 187 of the other copy, of the online copy. So welcome, Morris. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My submission is relatively simple, and it is that we should be prudent in what we address at the moment with the situation of the pandemic and the consequences for the community in terms of an economic downturn. I'm not saying that we should be specifically culling projects. I'm just saying that we need to be prudently reviewing them, and we should be reviewing them relative to the objective that's being pursued with the particular proposals. To me, it comes down to who, what, and why. Who wants it, what do they want and why do they need it. Now, if we had that information in detail about most of the projects that are proposed, it could put a very different bent on what we pursue and what we don't pursue. When I say we, I'm meaning the TCDC. I also believe that we should be confining ourselves to expenditure increases in every field to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. It's been running at about 1 to 1.5%. It's expected to be 1.5% this year. I don't think it needs to be tight. We should give ourselves wriggle room and allow expenditure maybe a couple of percent above the CPI at the max under due circumstances. But I do believe that we should hold ourselves into the CPI in terms of any expenditure growth, and that of course includes the rates, but that's not my real focus. My real focus is, are we hitting the right projects at the right time, and are we confining our costs to the CPI increases? I don't really believe that the majority of the public are in a position to say, oh, whether that project or this project is viable, because it inevitably comes back to the interest group, be it in Coromandel, be it in Whangamata, where I am, or anywhere else. That information is contained in the interest of a few usually. And that's why I keep coming back to who, what, and why. If you've got a project planned, who wants it, what is it, and why? And if we have that information clearly available to us, I think the plan will go through very smoothly. That's really all I've got to say.
Thank you very much, Morris. Some interesting points, the who, what, and the why. I appreciate that. Are there any questions of Morris? There being none, Morris, thank you so much for checking in with us this morning, for tuning in. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time and best wishes.
Thank you. We now have Len Salt on behalf of the Whitianga Residents and Ratepayers Association. Len?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good morning, Your Worship, Mayor Goudie, councillors and staff. Thank you for having me on. You've already identified me as chairman of the newly formed Whitianga Residents and Ratepayers Association. This association was formed immediately prior to the onset of COVID-19, and at the moment we've got a membership base of around 300 people. As part of the submission process, we've canvassed our members, and I can tell you that we've had an overwhelmingly a response that's overwhelmingly opposed to the proposed 9.98% rates increase. The thing that's come through very clearly is that we understand the need for incremental rate rises on an ongoing basis, and the long-term plan adopted by Council in 2018 called for a rates increase around 2.83%. Subsequent years being around just under 1%, with the highest being 4.31%. None of our members think those are unreasonable. However, what concerns us greatly is that yourself, Mayor Goudie, you've stated that in the longer term, it is anticipated that further increases in rates will be required, and Councillor Fox is on record as saying that he expects the increases at similar levels to carry on into future years. Now, these concern us greatly, but what is also of concern with a number of our members, and we've had discussions around this, is the the current debt levels that we're facing and the projected debt levels going forward into the future that the council is looking at. When the 2018-28 long-term plan was adopted, we had external debt of around $35 million and internal debt of $71 million. So our total debt was $106 million in 2018. 2 years later, our external debt is $66 million. And this annual plan calls for additional external borrowing of somewhere between $5 and $8 million. And please correct me if I've got those numbers wrong. That would take our total external debt to around $70 million. Now, in the long-term plan, our combined internal and external debt is forecast to grow to $199 million by 2028. Now, that's only 8 years from now. So we're looking at down the barrel of $199 million by 2028. Now, the same forecasts, and this is where we start to get concerned, the same forecasts show our external debt being reduced over that period of time from the current $66 million to around $25 million by 2028. Now, we need to maintain that reducing level of external debt to stay within our cap of 150% maximum of total income. In reality, what's happening is our external debt is going up instead of down. We've been borrowing against our depreciation reserves, our insurance reserves, our disaster reserves, our retained earnings, our reserve and development contributions, and our Power New Zealand shares reserve, and effectively subsidising our rates. Now, this information is available in the long-term plan. This is something that's publicly stated by council in the long-term plan. So it's not something that I'm making up. This is fact. So what's concerning us is that with the current proposed borrowing to take us to something over $70 million, and we're tracking higher in our external debt, we're using our reserves, we are extremely concerned about the council's future ability to maintain our infrastructure to go forward. And one example, as you know, is that in Whitianga we have one water supply which came under extreme pressure during the drought. We need to somehow look at infrastructure going forward into the future, and we're concerned that the reserves that we need to build that infrastructure are gone. So I would ask the council to very seriously consider, excuse me, the pressure that these borrowings are placing on the debt level and our ability to go forward with building infrastructure. And I'm going to read you a statement, if that's all right, and that'll be the end of my comments for now. Council restricted reserves and the council-backed reserves are held in cash and are not used to reduce external borrowing requirements, as they are held for a specific purpose and may be utilised at any time. Now, that's a statement by the Hamilton City Council. It would seem to me a very sensible approach, but it seems, excuse me, it seems to be that this council has departed quite significantly from the principles that other councils are doing. So if there's any comments on that, I'd very much appreciate it.
It's not our role to make comments in a hearing process, Len. It's for the councillors to ask questions once they've listened to the submitter, so the councillors can ask questions only. So are there any questions of Len from any of the councillors?
Yes, Murray here. Can I ask Len a question, please?
Yes.
Len, one thing I have been wrestling with as a local councillor in Whitianga is the expenditure on the skate park, and I notice you have gone through and removed a lot of expenditure and left that in.
Mm.
Can you give me your reasons why you've left that 469 in for a want, not a need, please?
It's a good question, and a number of the members and myself had that discussion, and the answer is the people behind the skate park have gone to enormous effort to raise money for that facility. And the comparison, somebody else made the comparison when the people of the councillors and the people of Whitianga need a new boat ramp or a boat ramp facility improved. That is funded by council, but when the kids want a skate park, they've got to raise the money for themselves. Now, that's not my comment, that's comment that's come back from 2 or 3 of the other members. Those kids and the people involved in the skate park have raised over 150 grand for that. I think it needs to be kept in balance. But if you want to go ahead and tell those kids that, excuse me, they're not getting the skate park having raised 150 grand, then, you know, go ahead, be my guest.
Thank you.
Thank you. And are there any other questions of Len? There being none. Thank you very much, Len. Good to have you tune in this morning.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So the next submitter is Bill Barclay. Is Bill here?
No, he's not here at the moment.
Okay, we'll take Helen.
Just working with him.
We'll take Helen if Helen would like to join us, and she's been diligently watching through the proceedings this morning. So welcome, Helen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Can you see me all right?
No, I can't see you. I'm not quite sure why, but can anybody else see Helen? Have you got your audio on, Helen? We can hear you.
Yes, I've got my audio on.
All right. Now I can see your spot. That's all right. I can't actually see you though. I'm not sure why.
Okay, here I am.
Hello.
There you are. Yeah.
Here I am. Okay.
So welcome. And Helen's submission is page 88. So welcome, Helen. The floor is yours, or the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. I've been a Whangamata resident since 94, and over that time, the town has steadily grown. And as a result of that, the level of waste from domestic and construction has exploded. As you know, solid waste is getting to be a problem. And a lot of this is dumped, but it's not truly waste. Now, we need to change how we deal with this at the cost of transporting to Waikato, out of the area into Waikato, is huge. And I think other towns on the Coromandel have done something to set up seagull centres, etc. And it's time the Whangamata looked at that sort of project for ourselves. It will save a lot of cost from transporting what isn't true waste out of the area. It's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. We need to make the best out of our resources to save the money on waste movement and the impact on the environment. Now, just because it's out of our area, an attitude of out of sight, out of mind, is not the right thing to do anymore. Waste recovery schemes are all around the country. They're successfully working and show that there is a successful template, usually tailored for that particular community, and that action should be taken by TCDC for the Whangamata community to use. That would not abdicate them from being responsible for their own waste. I feel if it's done in the confines of the transfer station, then they would be required to bring their waste in to pay the usual movement in costs, but then have an opportunity to divert it from the pit into an area that can be controlled by a group of people who can then repurpose, recycle, or sell or give to people to reuse. It's also an opportunity to supply valuable information to the community on home and business recycling. And I'm talking about beyond plastic, paper and glass, because there is an awful lot of construction and electronic recycling, which should be attended to. Because there's a myriad of valuable resources from unwanted goods, which can be extracted and reused for practical purposes, and it's shown in many places around the country. We need to make the best of what people call rubbish, but isn't. It's a resource, can be reused, repurposed. This is the time to reflect on how we are guardians of our own environment. We should work on the problems ourselves and not ship it out to another area where it is out of sight, out of mind. That's an irresponsible attitude to have, and we need to work harder on the solid waste issue locally. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Helen. Are there any questions of Helen?
No, yeah, actually, I have one, Sandra. Robin here. So Helen, I'm pleased that you're aware of what the Seagull Centre does, because it's obviously a great thing for our community, and I understand that was all council was involved in planning and that sort of thing, but it was mostly community led. So are you suggesting that something similar in Whangamata should not be driven by the community but should be led by the council?
No, not necessarily. I think a community-led organisation, either one that's currently existing or one that's purposely put in, would be the better option. But I know that there's things that council can do which would be a green light to these sort of things going ahead.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Is there another question? I'll ask one, Helen. Have you traversed some actual suggestions of activity with the community board?
Not lately, no. Although I have spoken to a councillor, Terry Walker, about this over quite a few years that he's been on as councillor. So not lately, I haven't, but I certainly would like to see that there's some keenness from the council and the community board both to get this sort of thing going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Helen. Appreciate it. Good to have you on board.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, is Bill Barclay with us at all? He is not. Then I'll invite Ian Collinson, who is with us. He's page 98. So Ian, welcome aboard.
Good morning, Your Worship and Councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to my submission. Firstly, let me just give you my bona fides. We are absentee owners, but we're only absent for a certain amount of the time. We spend 25% of our time at Hahei, and we always spend local. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, and we can see you very well as well.
Okay, fine, thank you. Yeah, the outline of my outline is the background to making my submission was around the proposed aggregate rates increase of 9.98%, as well as the capital expenditure program and the level of other expenditure. In terms of the rate increases currently being considered by the 78 local bodies in New Zealand, 11 or 14% have stated that they will freeze their rates in the coming year. A further 21 authorities, or 27%, have said that they will materially reduce what was originally proposed. Of the remaining 46 local bodies, Only a few have actually refused to consider a rate freeze or a reduction at this stage. In the region around TCDC, both the Bay of Plenty District Council and the Waikato Regional Council have agreed to a freeze, and by comparison, Auckland City has limited its increase to 3.5%. So on this basis, it would place TCDC's rate increase as the highest in the country. The proposed capital expenditure program, if it continued at the previous 3 years level, as I understand it, would require significant borrowing, which will place a further cost burden on the ratepayers. Good practice in business is to spend CapEx at the level of depreciation, which I understand currently from the accounts is about 22 million per annum, and especially in difficult times. A clear focus on must-do projects to the exclusion of like-to-do projects would significantly improve the financial position of TCDC going forward and contribute to lower rates increases. I find it difficult to understand the rationale for the very significant increases in other expenses in the 2021 plan. Operating expenses at 14% increase, or $4.9 million. Energy at 20% increase, that's $394,000. Coastal protection 50%, or $549,000. And insurance at 89%, that's $350,000. All seem to reflect the need for a challenging review of expenditure and efficiency improvements. The top 10 items in other expenses show an increase of $7.5 million, or 18.5%. Over my career in business, cost down and cost out has been a good mantra for effective management, and especially in difficult times. So in summary, I respectfully suggest that the Council could undertake a detailed review of CapEx and operating expenses with a view to significantly reducing the proposed rates increase to more realistic future levels, and to consider a modest across-the-board increase for 2021 whilst this review is undertaken. And I'm sure that being the local authority with the highest rating increase in the country is not a league table that the ratepayers would want to be at the top of. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ian. I just want to make one comment on that. We had announced the rate previous to COVID. The fact of the matter is we can't say anything different until we've actually made decisions to make something different. So we can't predetermine what the outcome is going to be subsequent to discussions. So unfortunately, we were left with that hanging as the previous determination until we'd done the hearings and had deliberations and further discussion to be able to change it.
Yeah. My comments really are COVID-free. So in that sense,
COVID-free. That's very interesting, because I rated your submission to the hearing as one of the better ones, one of the best ones, actually.
Well, that's very kind of you. But we are, in terms of, we've enjoyed going to the Coromandel and holidaying there for over 40 years. And we've also been property owners for 16 of those years. So we have a very strong attachment to the area.
No, I appreciate your comments from the submissions. I'll see if anybody wants to ask any questions further to that.
Sure.
It was very clear. So thank you very much for that. Do any of the other councillors have any questions of Ian?
Yeah, I just had one, Mayor Sandra. I just thought your presentation or your submission was very good, and there's some facts in there we'll take on board. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Very much so. Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Ian. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Right, so now we'll go to, is Bill with us at all? Bill Barclay, he's not. So we have some time. Does everybody want to take a 5-minute break? So we've got one submitter that we're yet to have appear. Otherwise, we can take a 5-minute break now for the next submitter, Ian Priest. I don't know if he's here.
Mayor Goudie, Ariana here. Just to let you know, we've been in contact with Bill. He's having some issues connecting, so we'll be bringing him to the schedule tomorrow. But we are now due to adjourn this time slot, and we will be back at 11 a.m.
Right, okay. So everybody's on board with that. So all I'm going to do is mute my audio and my sound, and I'll unmute it at 5 to 11. And if anybody wants to talk to me in between now and then, we'll take a break for the next 15 minutes. So thank you, everybody.
It's an hour and 15, isn't it?
Thank you. Yes, it is.
So
sorry, we've got an hour and 15.
Yeah, because that lot was meant to go till 10:30, and so it just goes to show how efficient it all is. So unless I'm told otherwise, I'll go and do other things till 11. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. And you will be joining the next meeting at 11. So you're not coming into this one. You will be joining the next slot.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. To absolutely clear, we're now vacating this session, and we'll all come back online at 11 o'clock, as Sally just pointed out. Thank you very much, Sally. You're a lifesaver. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. We'll all tune in at 11 o'clock. See you then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ariane.
Well done, everyone.